Bertil Fox built one of the thickest and most powerful upper bodies bodybuilding had ever seen. But when you watch him train, almost everything appears wrong. The weights look too heavy, the repetitions are fast, the range of motion is often extremely short, and on certain exercises, his entire body appears to be moving. Yet, Bertil insisted that he remained in control. So today, we are not simply going to laugh at his form or call it terrible. We are going to ask a much more difficult question. Was Bertil Fox using control cheating to build an extraordinary physique, or was the weight controlling him? The first thing that immediately separates Bertil from most bodybuilders is the amount of weight he's willing to handle. These are not slow textbook bodybuilding repetitions. He attacks the weight. The repetitions are fast, aggressive, and sometimes unstable. But we also have to acknowledge the result. Bertil developed enormous pecs, shoulders, traps, arms, and upper body thickness. So we cannot simply watch this and say that the muscles were doing nothing. Something was clearly being stimulated. The more important question is whether the enormous load was improving the muscular stimulus or forcing Bertil to compromise too many other things. On the dumbbell press, the weight limits his control and changes the path of the movement. On the incline press, the repetition becomes more about moving the bar from one position to another than maintaining perfect tension through the chest. And on the T-bar row, the movement becomes almost a full body effort. This is where heavy bodybuilding training can become difficult to evaluate. A repetition does not have to look beautiful to build muscle, but at some point, you have to ask whether the target muscle is still performing most of the work. This will become the central question throughout the entire workout. Is Bertil using momentum as a deliberate tool to overload the muscle? Or is he using momentum because the weight is simply too heavy to control properly? There is a major difference between controlling a cheat repetition and desperately completing one.
Yeah, but when you're training for size, you can't be a perfectionist. You know what I'm saying? You can't be. It's very difficult to be perfect movement when you're using this type of weight. You have to be a little bit of slightly bit of little bit of lean, a little bit of twist because of the weight. But as you can see, I'm still in control of the weight.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You see, so that's the main reason. A lot of people, they use weights that's too heavy. So you have to try and make sure that you do the exercise that you are in control of the weight, not the weight in control of you. So as I'm saying, I'm using very heavy weight.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for me for my arms to be perfect. It's impossible, as I'll never be able to use those type of weights. You know what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. So obviously with straight arms, it would be impossible to do that
No,
kind
really
of weight.
impossible.
Right.
And we're trying to build muscle here,
Right.
trying to get more muscle fibers into action.
Right.
And that's the whole thing. You get the idea? And I train hard because for me, to build muscles, you have to use heavy weights. And I try to do that.
This is Bertil's explanation. When you train for size, you have to use heavy weights. He accepts that the form will change, but he believes that he's still controlling the weight. And that gives us the most obvious question in the entire video. Is he really controlling it? Because some of the footage suggests that the opposite might be happening. We also have to challenge Bertil's belief that heavy weight is an absolute requirement for muscular growth. We have already seen completely different approaches in this channel. Serge Nubret built an extraordinary physique with relatively moderate weights, high volume, and constant tension. Lee Priest also used a large amount of volume without turning every exercise into a maximum strength demonstration. So, heavy training can certainly build muscle, but that does not mean maximum loading is the only way to build it. The muscle does not understand the number written on the dumbbell. It responds to tension, effort, fatigue, and progressive challenge. A heavier weight can create more tension, but only if the target muscle is still responsible for moving it. Once momentum, shorter range, and assistance from the rest of the body becomes excessive, adding more plates does not automatically mean adding more muscular stimulus. We also cannot separate Bertil's training philosophy from Bertil's genetics. A person with average structure and average recovery might copy this method and accumulate wrist, elbow, shoulders, and lower back problems long before building anything that resembles Bertil Fox. The fact that an exceptional bodybuilder survived a method does not prove that the method is universally intelligent.
Is that your own style? I don't think I've...
It's particularly my way. You know, I feel it when I get my arms close together mostly to my shoulders, and I press down. I feel it more in the outside of the triceps. You know, it takes a bit of getting used to, but I really feel it that way. It's my particular style, really. You know, as I says in bodybuilding, there's no real set rules. If you find you're doing a particular exercise, and by putting your hand a particular way, you feel it.
Right.
Or you know, on that particular part of your tricep, by all means do it. Because like I say, there's no set rules. It depends on the feel. You know, if you like it that way and you feel it, then, you know, fuck.
Bertil, you told me you were going to have an interesting twist to your seated dumbbell curls, but I didn't know it was going to be that interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. Is that your own model?
Oh yeah, it's personally my own style. You know, it's more like a hammer curl. You know, you see when I want to go down.
Yeah.
You see me sort of like a twist the dumbbells like that.
Right.
But I find that by doing that, it gives a full movement to the whole of the bicep, the belly, and everything. But the trick of this exercise is that if you start trying to do it that way, you should always start light, because there's puts a lot of stress on your joints and your elbows. So you got to be careful. You know, so I wouldn't advise anybody to just rush into this exercise. It takes time. So it'll always start light before you build up to it. But it's just my particular style. You know, and I like it. I find it gives my dumbbell a great pump.
It obviously works.
Yeah, well, I think so, don't you? Yeah. Cheers. You ready? Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Nice. Oh, sweet. All right.
Wow. You're pulling that bar really high up. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, well, the reason is that normally the conventional style is where you pull the bar, right, up to here, and then go down,
Right.
okay? But I find We're actually pulling the bar like this, where you go bow the chin.
Right.
It's like you're doing a clean. You understand what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
And it seems to put more emphasis on my traps. So that's the reason why I do it that way. It's my particular style. But I find it gives me a good feeling on the traps, and I think it works them a little better. You know, as I said, there's no set rules. That's the way I feel them, so that's the way I do it like that. That's the main reason.
Seems to be working for you.
Well, what do you think?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. I think it works pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. That I would wait for him to finish his set of high pulls. It gives my chance, my body time to recover from my set. You know what I'm saying?
Go ahead.
So I can go ahead, because I find if I go immediately, I haven't fully recovered. You know, so normally it's after my partner's finished his set, then I'll be doing mine.
This is where Bertil's philosophy becomes genuinely interesting. He says bodybuilding has no fixed rules. Find the movement that you feel in the muscle and perform it in the way that works for you. When I studied personal training, technique was presented as the foundation of almost everything. Bertil appears to have looked at the rule book and thrown it straight out of the gym window. And there is some truth in what he says. People do have different limb lengths, structures, mobility, and joint positions. An exercise does not have to look identical for every person. A slight change in angle or range may genuinely allow someone to feel the target muscle more effectively. But individualization should not become an excuse for absolutely anything. Feeling a muscle is useful, but feeling is not infallible. A movement can feel intense because the muscle is working hard. It can also feel intense because the joint is in an outward position, the muscle is being rapidly stretched, or the weight is being thrown through a small section of the movement. That is why we need more than sensation alone. We also need control, progression, and some reasonable way of assessing whether the exercise is producing results without constantly damaging the body. The short range is also important. Bertil does not appear interested in completing every exercise through the largest possible range of motion. He works inside the section where he says he feels the muscle the most. Again, that does not automatically make the movement useless. But when short range is combined with enormous weight and considerable momentum, it becomes extremely difficult to determine whether we are watching muscular overload or simply mechanical survival. Bertil's style was not random in the sense that he had no idea what he was doing. He had clearly developed a personal system and repeated it for years. The problem is that a system can be internally consistent and still contain unnecessary risk.
How many sets do you normally do on this?
5 sets
Uh-huh.
normally. Superset with the old dips, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But today we do 4. You know.
How many reps do you usually do on this?
Oh, it varies between 8 to 10.
How many hours per day do you train, and how many days per week, etc.?
Well, now?
Yeah, right now.
I train. I would say I train 6 times a week. You know, at the moment I rest one day.
Uh-huh.
I train basically, at the moment, for now, I just train about, say, 2.5 to nearly 3 hours in the morning, and that's it. You know, when a contest come up, 8 weeks before a show, then I would train twice.
Good.
5 sets by itself is not extraordinary. 8 to 10 repetitions is also a completely normal bodybuilding range. But we cannot examine these numbers in isolation. 5 sets across multiple exercises performed with extremely heavy weights inside sessions lasting approximately 2.5 hours, apparently repeated 6 days a week, becomes enormous workload. This creates an obvious question. How could Bertil train for that long, that frequently, and with that level of aggression and still recover? The first possibility is that not every set was taken to true muscular failure. A workout can look extremely intense while still containing varying levels of effort. Some sets may have been heavy working sets, while others may have been performed farther from complete failure. We also have to consider his genetics, years of adaptation, food intake, sleep, lifestyle, and of course the pharmacological environment of elite professional bodybuilding. Bertil did not suddenly begin performing this workload as an average trainee. His body had adapted to increasingly difficult training over many years. But even with all those advantages, tolerating a routine does not prove that every set was necessary. There is a difference between recovering enough to train again and being fully recovered. Bertil might have been capable of returning to the gym and producing another hard session. That does not necessarily mean every muscle, joint, and connective tissue structure had completely recovered. And his comments about occasional wrist and back problems may be the evidence of the accumulated cost.
Have you ever had any injuries? I mean, as heavy as you train, you would think that you would be having a
Yeah,
lot.
of course. Anybody that train who, when you love your sport and you sort of always blast it to the limits like I do, you're bound to get a little, we're not doing tennis here, this is weightlifting. You're
Right.
bound to get a little injury. I have some problem with my back, my wrist. At the moment, I have some problem here with my wrist.
Right.
Yeah, nothing real serious, but yeah, I've had a little bit back problems, but they go away and they come back. That's part of the game, I suppose.
This is the opposite of Mike Menser's final philosophy. Menser would eventually argue that the harder you train, the less frequently you should train. Bertil appears to combine high effort, high volume, and high frequency. Both men build great physiques while reaching almost completely opposite conclusions. That is exactly why bodybuilding cannot be reduced to one universal formula.
That was hard.
You get on there.
I don't know. I don't really conscious of the weight,
What is
I
it,
just,
240?
I don't know. I just press. See, my idea of training is, as I said before, if the weight is too light in the 10 reps that I'm doing, or I'm going for 8 to 10 reps, then I shove on some more.
Right.
I'm not sort of conscious of what sort of weight's on the bar, what any special record. It's just the feel, you know what I'm saying? And it's always good now and again to do an exercise for a couple of months and then change it. That's what bodybuilding is all about. It's like sex, isn't it? You don't have sex the same.
This might be the most surprising part of Bertil's entire approach. He does not record his weights, he does not appear interested in documenting every repetition or proving that he has progressed from one workout to the next. If the weight feels sufficiently heavy, that's enough for him. Mike Menser would probably consider this a major mistake. Menser believed that the logbook was essential because strength progression gave you objective evidence that the training was working. Without records, memory becomes unreliable. You might feel as though you are training harder while using the same weight, completing fewer repetitions, or gradually reducing the range of motion. Bertil also says that he changes exercises every couple of months. Variety can certainly keep the training psychologically interesting and expose the muscle to different movements. But changing exercises does not automatically produce growth. The muscle still needs a progressive challenge. Variety without progression is simply different activity. However, we also have to recognize that Bertil's method clearly worked for him. His upper body was extraordinary. His chest was enormous. His shoulders and traps created incredible thickness. And his arms looked powerful even by the standards of elite professional bodybuilding. So it would be dishonest to claim that his training produced no muscular stimulus. My conclusion is that Bertil succeeded partly because of his approach and partly despite it. The heavy weights, aggression, confidence, and willingness to work probably contributed to his development. But the excessive momentum, inconsistent range, extreme workload, and lack of objective record keeping were not necessarily required to produce that result. The most important lesson is not to copy Bertil's repetitions. It is to understand why he used them and then separate the productive principles from the unnecessary risk. Train hard, progress over time, develop a technique that suits your structure, but do not assume that making an exercise look more violent than it really is automatically makes it more effective. So, what do you think? Was Bertil Fox's unconventional form an intelligent method of control cheating? Or was he genetically gifted enough to grow despite allowing the weight to control too much of the movement? This has been Brutal Bertil Training Decoded. See you next time.